And welcome back to Dear Jane, Scott Baker and Marcy Little. How are you doing, Marcy?
Great.
We are excited about today's episode. We've got a lot of exciting things to talk about with our guest. But before we get to our guest, we want to mention our sponsor. And to talk about our sponsor, get ready because this is just going to be moving. You're going to laugh. You're going to cry. To talk about our sponsor, Choose Life Marketing, here's Marcy.
Choose Life Marketing. If you are a pro-life organization or group that needs to reach the abortion-minded woman or needs to reach women and people who care about the abortion-minded woman, you need to work with our friends at Choose Life Marketing. They are a full-service marketing agency dedicated to helping reach the abortion-minded woman with the resources that she needs. They work with pregnancy centers. They work with other pro-life groups. Check them out. They can help you get your message out to the right people at the right time, in the right place, all of which is very important.
ChooseLifeMarketing.com. All right. Not a whole lot of crying on that one. We need to maybe...
Yeah, I can emote more.
Yeah, next time. All right, we welcome Christina Bennett to the podcast today. Christina, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you very much for joining us. There's so much that we want to talk with you about as we were looking and we know of you in the movement because you have been very active. But your personal story is very, very interesting. How did you become involved in the pro-life movement? Sort of tell us your story from the beginning and how you became so involved.
Well, thank you guys for having me on. I got involved when I was in college. I was going to school for business communications, and I had never heard abortion talked about in my home or in my church. And I was visiting a church, and someone approached me and said, God wants you to know something remarkable happened around the time of your birth. And I don't even remember who this person was, which is funny. And I've heard a lot of messages from people, but this really stayed with me around the time of your birth. So I asked my mom, did anything remarkable happen around the time of my birth? And she said that she met an angel before I was born, but she did not want to talk to me about it, which was also very strange because she's never said anything like that before. So I actually let it go for a couple of months. I was involved with Campus Crusade for Christ, which is a very popular college ministry for Christians. And I went away on a missions trip for the summer, and I ended up journaling and saying, when I get back home, I'm going to ask my mom, what do you mean you met an angel before I was born? And I did just that. I got back home and I cornered her in the bathroom when she was getting ready to go, probably to work. I don't even know. And I said, what do you mean that you met an angel before I was born? And she said, I can't tell you. You would hate me. And I assured her that I would not hate her and that she could open up and tell me. And then she began to share that she got pregnant with me out of wedlock. And she actually went to a church at first where she was being mentored. But the woman mentoring her said, if you come back to this church, I'll be the first person to put my foot in the door and not let you in. So she was rejected by this mentor. And my father was also coercing her to have an abortion because he had 2 kids already from 2 different women and didn't want a third baby from a third woman. And they weren't married. And their relationship was dysfunctional in a lot of ways. So the pressure from my dad combined with the rejection from her mentor led her to Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. This is 1981. And she paid for the abortion. They put a white hospital robe on her. And they told her to just go talk to the counselor and then to go into the doctor's office. But the counselor didn't give her any counsel. She basically looked at her and said, well, this seems like the best decision for you to make. And that was it. And she told her to go into the doctor's office. But my mom paused for a moment in the hallway of the hospital. And in that moment, a janitor saw her crying and walked up to her and said, do you want to have your baby? It was an African-American woman, an elderly woman. And my mom said, yes. And then she said to her, God will give you the strength. And it was really that one phrase, God will give you the strength, that really empowered my mom to get up and to walk into the waiting room, and she was planning on taking her stuff and leaving, but the abortionist called her into his office, and she recounts seeing blood on the floor from the last abortion when she walked in. She was disgusted, and he said, you've already paid for this, when she told him that she wanted to leave. And again, she, said, I want to leave. And he said, you're just nervous. You can get through this. And then he ended up yelling at her and saying, don't leave this room. And she ran out. And she called my dad on the payphone. She collected her stuff, called my dad, and they decided to get married, which was awesome. With my dad trying to take responsibility like that and get married. But they still had a lot of the issues that they had prior to marriage. So I think they were married less than 2 years. And then I just grew up in a family, divorced family, going back and forth between my mom and my dad. But my mom never planned to tell me that story. She would have taken it to the grave and never told me. But when she told me, I was encountered with the reality of what abortion looks like in a personal way for the first time ever. Because in high school and even in college, I was a virgin. I was a virgin until I got married in my 30s. So I wasn't ever in need of an abortion, and I just kind of was disconnected from that reality. So this was my first encounter with, wow, this impacted me. I could have lost my life. I became very, very close to losing my life. And that caused me to pray and think about it and ask God to direct me and what to do with the story. And basically, one day in prayer, I had the impression on my heart that God was saying to me that he wanted me. But then the question that went along with that was, how do you think I feel about the others? And so that really started me off on a journey to figure out who the others were. And boy, I had no idea what I was about to find out. Tragic.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It makes me think, I keep thinking about that lady that talked to your mom in the hospital and just said, you're gonna have the strength for this. I see study after study that have come out from women who have had abortions that said if one person had expressed support or said that they, would support me, or that there would be some kind of system to support me, then I would have made a different decision. And I just think that's so
Right.
powerful. We never know the power that our words are going to have on another person, and their future. Um, how has that, have you seen that played out in your ministry? Like, do you encounter other people who have similar stories? And what's your work like with them?
I mean, sometimes I do. I've heard all sorts of different stories from people. Tragically, I have had people say to me, I was going to be aborted and I think I should have. I've had that happen a couple times where people will say that, my mom should have aborted me because, she struggled, or I've also had people tell me I I was going to be aborted, but it doesn't really seem to have an impact on their life. They don't process it the same way. And one thing I've learned is that, and after just talking to just hundreds and thousands of people over the past almost 20 years of doing pro-life work, you can basically have the same or a similar scenario and just a completely different response to it. So in conversations, I will have met people who tell me, my dad was adopted, and that's why I'm pro-life. And then another person will say, my parent was adopted, and that's why I'm pro-choice, because I, see the choice that was made. And it's just very interesting. And so it's never a given that because you have a certain experience that you're going to allow it to lead your life in a certain way. One woman has an abortion and it's painful for her, and she stuffs that pain into her, down into her soul, and she tries to carry on with her life. Another woman has an abortion and she feels that same amount of pain, and she goes out and says, that's it, I'm gonna, make my voice heard, and I'm going to tear down the abortion industry, and I'm going to, testify before the state capitol, and I'm going to do all these things. And it's just so interesting to see how that plays out. Probably the most stories I've heard are from women who've chosen life, and sometimes that's a result of either me working with them or counseling them, or when I worked at a pregnancy center, you know, the ultrasound and the services, we would see a lot of women choose life because of those things. So I've seen a lot of amazing stories play out, and it just further solidifies my belief that this is the most important cause worth fighting for.
Your mom's story about going into the doctor's office with the blood and all that. I mean, that sounds like a horror story. I mean, it just
Oh,
flat
definitely.
out does. And don't go. You
Right.
can't leave here. I mean, no joke. That sounds like a horror story to me.
Yeah, total
So,
psycho.
yeah. So, with the knowledge that your mom considered that, we've talked to other people who were almost aborted, and we hear stories about how that impacted their feeling of self worth in some way. Did you experience that? Have you?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Uh, so I have an interesting story about that. I dealt with a lot of rejection growing up, and part of that, I'm sure, is just growing up without my dad as present in, you know, in my home as he could have been. So part of that was that. But I remember in college, just really, I found out by this point that I was scheduled to be aborted, and I was really crying out in prayer to God and asking Him to give me insight into that. And I remember going on campus for a walk, and I ran into this girl, and she was taking a like a Bible class at this church, and it was more of a charismatic church. So what I'm about to say is like, you know, not every person of faith would agree with this mindset. It's more of a charismatic way of thinking. But regardless, it was really impactful to me. She told me she was taking this class on abortion, not on abortion, on different things. But what she said to me was, one of the things that we learned is that spiritually things can affect you even when you're in the womb. And she said, for example, if you were in your mother's womb and your mother was thinking of having an abortion, spiritually you can feel that rejection, like even in the womb. And she said that to me. You know, what she said, it was, you know, spirit of rejection. But that to me was like a groundbreaking thought. And she didn't know my story. So it wasn't like she was saying it because she knew my story. But it kind of connected some dots for me when I thought, wow, and, you know, even from like a natural standpoint, non-spiritual, scientific standpoint, we know that babies can feel things in the womb. And even like I'm an adoptive mom, you know, and I adopted my son through foster care. And that's what we learn about trauma in the womb. And even in the womb, if a mom is dealing with alcoholism or she's being abused, that can cause a child to, when they're born, have certain, you know, issues because of the trauma that they were dealing with in the womb. So, you know, we don't fully understand how that works, but I know that I dealt with a lot of rejection, and I think it comes back to almost being aborted, and also the fear that my mom was dealing with and the rejection and everything else. But I will say, thankfully, you know, I didn't stay that way. So, you know, you don't have to stay that way if that's your story. So, the biggest help for me was my relationship with God and learning about that kind of love, His love as a father for me. But then, in addition, you know, I therapy and counseling, and I'm about to celebrate 10 years of marriage this summer. So those are the things that I didn't know would ever be possible when I was younger, growing up, just even with a family where a lot of my aunts were abused and domestic violence. So God's really redeemed a lot for me, but I definitely dealt with that. But I don't, I wouldn't say that I don't recognize that person anymore. I would just say that now I've really kind of blossomed into a different person than I was as a child. I was very um, shy, and, you know, I basically used books as an escapism, and I felt a lot of rejection. And now I just have a different life.
I love that. I love how God goes into the broken and hurting places and heals and redeems and causes beauty to come out of that.
Right.
I'm thinking about your mom's experience at the hospital with the abortionist. I'm thinking about the blood on the floor and just the pain that your mom lived with, thinking about almost having aborted you and the pain that you've dealt with. As I think about the fact that our vice president of the United States is on a reproductive freedom tour. She's the first that we know of, sitting vice president in any administration that's ever toured an abortion clinic. And I'm thinking about those things that she probably didn't see as part of her tour. You know, they probably didn't show her the bloody floor, or they probably
Right.
omitted the, oh, don't go in that room. The abortionist is yelling at a woman that she can't leave. And it is making me think of, like, what are the other things that you think she's not seeing on her tour of these
Oh
abortion clinics
gosh.
that people need to know about?
It makes me think of the Wizard of Oz, but in a much more dark and sinister way, But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm hiding behind the curtain, don't look behind the curtain. Um, as you mentioned, the blood, the actual process of an abortion. Like that's what you say that you're there for, to support abortion. But did you see the doctor after he has removed or she has removed the fetal remains of that baby, and they place them on a table to make sure that everything is taken out of a woman so she doesn't have an infection? And they're putting together the little arm and the little leg. And one of the former abortion doctors, who did a video for us, I work for Live Action, and we do a lot of videos, and we have a series called What is an Abortion? And we have former abortion doctors telling their stories. And one of them in particular tells a story about one of her staff members wanted to see an abortion. She worked at the front desk, and she was like, I really support abortion rights, and can you show me? And she's like, yeah, on a slow day I'll show you. So she goes, takes her back on a slow day, and she's showing her the pieces of the baby. And in that instant, she sees a bicep, and it flashes to her 3-year-old son how he would run around and say, Mommy, I'm so strong. And he would like show his muscle. And it flashed in her mind. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm killing children. And that was like a part of her awakening. But those are the things that Kamala Harris, I'm sure, did not see. She didn't see a little bicep, a little foot, a little arm, or those baby body parts taken to the incinerator by the Stericycle or whatever medical waste company is coming to pick them up and to burn them. And I'm sure she didn't see the women. She said that she heard a lot of stories, but I doubt any of them were the women who are telling her how an abortion ruined their life, how it ruined their relationships, how 5, 10, 15 years later they're still dealing with pain, how they had a botched abortion, how they had a perforated uterus, how their abortion pill was, made them feel like they were going to die. She didn't hear those stories. It's very embarrassing, to be honest with you. And especially the ways in which they have, championed her as the first female Black, vice president. Of course, it's like, this is part of the agenda. Have her be the first, Black female VP, and then send her into the abortion clinic, as if this is supposed to be some kind of a groundbreaking historical moment, for Black history, or for the United States history. It's really pathetic and embarrassing. And I say that lightly. I mean, there's a lot more I could say. It's strategic, and they're trying to get a message across. She's gone to, these Black women's festivals like the Essence Festival, and she'll do events there. And she's really trying to carry out Margaret Sanger's life work, which was to really kind of target communities of color with abortion and birth control and this whole messaging.
How do we get that truth out? I mean, that's what's so bizarre to me, is that the actual truth, the actual historical facts of the origination of all of abortion, and it's targeting the minority community, is completely lost. Completely lost. Nobody wants to talk about it. I guess my question is, how do we get the truth out? How do we make inroads with the Black community? How does the pro-life movement make inroads with the Black community?
Well, I think one of the best ways is finding Black pro-lifers. There's not a ton of us. There are probably thousands of people who identify as pro-life, but I'm talking about those that it's their job, they're going out, they're speaking. Then you're into probably the hundreds or so of people, but they exist, myself, Alveda King, Catherine Davis, Ryan Baumberger, Walter Hoy, Arnold Colbreth. There are a number of us that are, committed to this, and partnering with individuals like that, and and not reinventing the wheel, but seeing what are you doing and how I can come alongside you and support you. There's a woman who runs a group called Sisters for Life, and it's a group of African American women,
Hmm.
and they go outside of abortion clinics specifically, and they minister to them. And so coming alongside those groups and saying, how can I be of support to what you're doing, I think is really important. And just finding ways to build bridges as well. So if you are like a white Christian, for example, do you have a relationship with any of the Black churches in your community, any of the Black pastors, any Black activists, any community leaders, do you go to Martin Luther King Jr. celebrations? Do you go to Juneteenth celebrations? If there's no interaction outside of, your desire to talk about abortion, then nobody wants to hear it. But if you are in the community and you're making inroads and you have relationship, then people are much more open. So I would say one of the ways that I've seen um, the church and the pro-life movement do that well, there's a lot of room to grow, but is the pregnancy resource centers, because the pregnancy resource centers are service oriented. And so if go to Black pastors or Black churches and you present what's happening in the pregnancy resource centers, very few of them will have a problem with that unless they've been indoctrinated by, the abortion industry telling them that these are fake clinics. But very few have heard that false messaging. And so most will respect that. I remember I spoke at a banquet. I speak at banquets across the country. And this particular banquet, they had invited these Black pastors who were very influential. And I remember one of them coming up to me after, and he said, I was so surprised to see one of my congregants in the video. Like they served one of the girls in my congregation. And he said, I thought these people were kind of racist. Like he goes, I didn't know that they were doing all this stuff. And so, we have to remember that it's not going to be easy work, because you're facing, however many years, 50, 60 years of people believing things in a certain way. So even that comment about like, I thought they were going to be racist, like to me, that comment is pretty typical, so it because you're hearing, well, all conservatives are this way. And maybe you're seeing conservative politicians in your neighborhood or your area, and they're voting against social service programs and whatever the case may be. And I say this as a conservative Republican myself, but I'm in the minority for that. But you're seeing this, and in your mind, you're also hearing what your grandparents have told you, what your parents have told you. So basically, you think you don't care. You say you care about Black babies in the womb, but you don't care about Black men dying on the streets. You don't care about Black women after the baby's born. And they have these accusations. And so it really takes building trust. It takes time. And not a lot of people are willing to do that, over the years, I've had a lot of people say to me, Christina, I want to reach the Black community. I want to help the Black community, blah, blah, blah. And I always take people at face value and believe they're very sincere. And I always offer up help. But then I've learned in 20 years that not everyone who says that wants to pay the price. It's like the gospel, I want to reach the lost, but it's like, well, to reach the lost, it's like you got to kind of be uncomfortable a little bit. It's like you got to talk to the lady at the grocery store and say, hey, and not, we don't always want to do that, because it's like, I want to go home and watch TV, So in the same way, you want to reach the Black community. It's like, we got to be uncomfortable a little bit. And that accounts for me too. Like, just because I'm Black, it makes it somewhat easier, but not completely. Like, just me being Black doesn't give me easy access to go into every Black church and say, let's talk about abortion. They still are like, who are you?
No, I
So
like
it's
that.
work.
I like what you're saying, because I've always come at it from is it a messaging thing? Is it a social safety net thing? And what I hear you saying is we've got to bridge the racial divide. We've got to build relationship first, however that
Right.
looks. And then it
Right.
kind of includes, sort of all of the above. But it's not just
Right.
a messaging. It's not how we're saying it necessarily. And it's not
Right.
just social safety net. We've got
Right.
to reach out on other issues. Just be friends, like you mentioned, showing up at all the different events and such. It starts with that.
Yeah, just bridging the gap. When I was in Africa, I went to Mozambique for 3 months, and I remember I was with a white missionary named Heidi Baker, but she has all these different missions groups in all parts of Africa. And, she really gave me some relief because she said, people come here, a lot of Americans come, and they want to set up these big crusades and they want to give out stuff, which is not bad. But she goes, people will take it. Of course they'll take it. She goes, but they don't, doesn't mean they trust you. They're hungry. So they're going to take things. Doesn't mean they trust you. She goes, um, become a friend to somebody. She goes, that's what you're here for 3 months in Mozambique, make one friend. And that really just made me feel like, okay, I can do that. I can make a friend. And so it was this little boy that I made, Pedro, and he was a friend. And, I brought him some water, and I think I ended up getting him shoes. And I knew he was considered me a friend because, and I feel like so emotional saying this because it's so sad, and it's so sweet, but he gave me a picture, and it was like a photograph that was torn that he had of another missionary in years prior. It was like a white missionary and him. And I guess he was holding on to that picture, and then he gave it to me, which was like so special. And so those are the intimate kind of moments that we need to create with people, where it's like then they go past seeing who you are politically, or
Yeah.
it's not the banner over your head is not Republican, conservative, white, evangelical, pro-lifer. It's Scott,
Yeah.
um and
Yeah.
that tears down division.
You know what that makes me think of, Marcy, is, some of the, like, for example, in Ohio, when we had this vote recently for the constitutional amendment to enshrine abortion into their constitution. And the polling came back after the vote. And one of the things they found throughout was no matter what the pro life messaging was, they just, from the very beginning, no matter what the pro life movement said, we just weren't believable.
Right.
Even when we were saying the truth, we just, for whatever reason, we weren't believable. And Christina, what I hear you saying is it's the same thing until
Right.
we have that relationship in place. You've got to have that relationship in place. And once you do, then you get over sort of the trust, and then you become believable. I see a sort of a
Right.
connecting of the dots there.
Yeah, and it takes time, and it's hard because for the most part, I mean, we have some diversity in the pro life movement for sure. We've got pro life progressive, we've got pro life atheists, and secular pro life, and they all do great work. But for the majority, most of us are Christian or Catholic, which is a Christian, of course, but like Protestant or Catholic. And many of us are conservative. And so, therefore, you know, you don't have a lot of our talking heads or like our main figures talking about the power of empathy, building relationships, relational understanding. People are on social media and they are very popular because they know how to get people angry and upset, and and get an audience. And sometimes you need that. You definitely need that. Like if there's something going on that's evil and immoral in your town or your city, for example, yesterday in Connecticut, we had a public hearing. We have a bill called SJ4, and they're trying to put all these things in one big package, um, and say that it's discriminatory if basically they want to put abortion in the Constitution, but they also want to put in the Constitution protections for like trans athletes. And they would say that you cannot discriminate against a trans athlete. If a biological boy is running on a girls' sports team, you can't discriminate against him, and you can't discriminate against someone who wants to terminate a pregnancy. And we've seen this play out a million times. And the bill's like super vague. And so I testified against this yesterday. I was doing that, last night. But sometimes you do have to be very strong and use strong words. One of the guys after me or before me said, he said to the legislators, God is going to judge you, and this is going to carry with you beyond the grave, and this is your warning, be warned. And they said, okay, any questions? Nope, next. Because they don't want to really hear it. And I thought, boy, I was scared listening to this guy talk about that. And so sometimes that kind of an approach is necessary, but your everyday person, they kind of get turned off by the soapbox, preacher, and they just want to know you care. It's like they don't care about how much you know until they know that you care. And so I think service acts go a long way. And it can be something as simple as a church having a diaper bin in their lobby, just a bin, and then they collect diapers, and then one day the church goes out into the community, maybe into an inner city, maybe into a lower income neighborhood, and you say, I'm doing a diaper drive, and you just have a table set up and you pass out diapers. Something as simple as that can go a long way. Like I guarantee if someone does that, you go into any inner city neighborhood and you pass out 100 boxes of diapers, you will hear conversations about abortion, you will hear conversations about adoption. They will like you more than they did, the day before, and you'll get some phone numbers, you'll get some invitations, like to connect with people. Like it's a guaranteed way to connect with people. And you could do it with Christmas toys. You can do it with, I mean, again, it's like we're not reinventing, this process. Like people do all the time with social services. The YMCA does it, WIC does it, all these programs. And it's not, like you were saying, it's not just the social, safety net. It's not just that, but it's a means to, opening the door and having conversations. And that's why I said the pregnancy centers do it, do it well. But they shouldn't be, the only ones. It's like all of us should take part in having these conversations. I also want to throw in social media too, because social media now has just allowed for a certain amount of intimacy where people actually can get to know you and feel like they trust you, even if they've never met you. So that's actually a fascinating way too of connecting with people. Unfortunately, what we're seeing happen, and I'm seeing, is there's a rise in pro-abortion advocates on social media, and especially women of color. If you go onto TikTok, they are rising up, Black OBGYNs and doctors and nurses. And some of them are beautiful, intelligent, very skilled. And they are quite manipulative. And they're coming on and saying, oh, you've heard the abortion pill, oh no, it's 10 times safer than Tylenol. Oh, they're trying to push these anti-abortion laws and you won't be able to have a miscarriage. And they've got millions of viewers. And so social media and the intimacy that it provides has actually allowed some of that trust to take place as well, but sometimes in a negative way. And so for me, that's why I'm on Instagram. Black Pro-Life Woman is my Instagram account. I'm on TikTok. I don't have a ton of followers on TikTok. It kind of scares me a little bit because I'm 42. So I'm just like, okay, I'm scared of these young people. Like they're going to eat me alive, some of them, with the comments. So I'm just kind of pacing myself on there. But I'm putting myself in those spaces to try to connect with people, because the majority of women having abortions, they're in their 20s. They're in their 20s. So it's like, what is a 20-year-old? What is a 24-year-old? Who is she going to listen to? What does she want to hear? It's like, we kind of have to like put ourselves in their shoes. What kind of a message is going to stop a 24-year-old in their tracks and get them to listen? Know your audience is one of the most basic rules of communication. And then you tailor your message based on knowing your audience. And I've often told people in the pro-life movement, yes, our audience is the woman seeking abortion, also the post-abortive woman, but the woman seeking abortion and the man as well. But who is that woman? Planned Parenthood does a really good job at knowing their audience. If you go into Planned Parenthood's Instagram or if you go into their TikTok, you would think that it's a Black Lives Matter movement page because every other picture is a Black woman. And then they're throwing in messages like, Black women need to thrive and we support Black women. And sometimes that message is disconnected from abortion. It's just like, if they have t-shirts that say, trust Black women, or I stand with Black women. And on the back, it might say Planned Parenthood. But sometimes you can't even see the Planned Parenthood. But they're willing to kind of go out on the ledge and just say that alone, because they know that that's enough of a bridge to get someone to wear it. Because not a lot of Black women are going to wear a shirt that says Planned Parenthood, no matter who you are. Because we're just generally, very few Black women are going to do that, unless they're just like a radical activist. But they'll wear a shirt that says stand with Black women with a little bit of Planned Parenthood on the back. And so they're crafty. they're willing to take, strategic risks. Whereas the pro-life movement, like we're like, oh, well, I don't want to single out a certain race, or I don't want people to think that, I don't think that all women are special, and so we have these hangups a little bit. And it's like, okay, well, we have our hangups, but they've got Black women wearing their t-shirts, and so they're hitting the mark. And so sometimes we have to kind of just think through those things and how can we best communicate.
You said a lot of really great things that I love. One that has stood out to
Thank
me,
you.
you've mentioned a couple of times, is we got to be willing to invest time, whether that's developing
Right.
relationships, whether that's getting plugged into the pro life community and movement. I think you gave a lot of really great examples for people, no matter where they are, what their comfort level is. You can organize a diaper drive, or you can donate diapers or other things to your
Right.
local pregnancy center. You can volunteer at the pregnancy center. You can speak out on social media, even though that does feel like a scary place sometimes. Um,
Right.
and I know people are still going to feel hesitant. And I think it's because the other side has done such a great job of branding abortion as like
Oh yeah.
liberating or not a big deal. And I know we're coming up on time, but I wonder if you can speak a little bit to what do you think are the biggest deceptions that the other side has brought that makes it hard for people who are pro-life to speak out and to say anything. I know one that comes to mind for me is like they've positioned their side as compassionate towards women. We care
Right.
about
Right.
women. So then the automatic assumption or feeling is, well, if I speak out against abortion, that's going to signal that I'm anti-woman or that I don't care about women. So what are some of those deceptions that we need to start highlighting for people even within the pro-life movement to help them feel more emboldened to speak out?
Right. Well, that's a great question. I think it's important for us to recognize that we have the moral high ground on this issue, whether you're Christian or atheist, whoever you are. If you're pro-life, like you have the moral high ground. Like it is immoral to dismember children in the womb, and so we have to know we have to know who we are, and we have to be confident in what we believe. And it's not the easiest thing to do, but we have to be in a place where it doesn't really matter what you say about me. Like I'm the only person like this in my family. I am the only person like this in my entire family. I mean, I don't mean like my husband who I chose, but I mean my family, my dad, my siblings, my aunts, my uncles. Like I am the odd person out, and I've been that way for almost 20 years, the only conservative, the only person who's actively pro-life. And so I'm not giving advice that I haven't walked out myself, but it's okay if people think the worst and they don't understand you. You have to know who you are. I know, my sweater says be kind. I know I'm a kind person. I know I'm a loving person. I know I'm a compassionate person. Now, do I have room to grow? Yes, I do, of course. But you're not going to tell me that I hate women. You can say it. It doesn't resonate with me. Like, who are you to say that to me? Like, you don't know me. You're not going to tell me that I'm bigoted. You're not going to tell me that I'm narrow minded. You're not going to tell me any of these things. You can say it, but I'm going to disagree with you because I know who I am and who God's made me to be. And so we need that confidence where we're not ashamed of who we are. And I think sometimes people, maybe they don't have that because they've not walked it out in a way where they feel like evidence of that. So if someone says, you don't love women, maybe you think, well, I don't know, what have I done for women? Maybe part of my confidence is me working with women for so many years, and I can say, no way, like I've got receipts, like, the young people say. So that could be part of it, but I think that's important, is just knowing who we are, and just seeing through just the shallowness. Like I always tell people, my body, my choice. Like somebody came up with that phrase in a boardroom. Like, do you understand? Like reproductive justice, reproductive freedom. Like people get paid like to come up with these phrases. And what does it really mean? Like we can make up our own phrases, and sometimes we do. Pro woman, pro life, and various things, and just cutting through. That language that they try to use to control us. It's like that's not going to control me. um so yeah, that's what's kind of helped me all of these years. I don't know, I will say this too. I'm not really sure why, but I really don't get a lot of hate Um, I just don't. Like, I've been very public. I've got like, not a massive amount of followers. I mean, like, maybe 30,000 or so on my Instagram, and I've traveled a lot throughout the country. I don't get a lot of hate. I don't get hate mail. In 20 years, like, I don't get hate mail. I don't get, and I've met with a lot of like progressive people that are pro-abortion and everything else. I think being cordial goes a long way. Like, I really do. Now I am a Black woman, so if I was a white man, I'm not saying that some of, who I am hasn't shielded me from some of the typical accusations. I'm sure it has. But I've also been in front of abortion clinics and had people threaten to punch me and everything else. I just think that we can't dehumanize people in the process of trying to save lives. And if you are talking to someone that's pro-abortion, and there's always a certain level of respect that you give that person because they're a human being, and you don't make fun of them. Like, so for me, I don't like certain phrases that people say, whether it's political or whatever else. Like, I just don't participate in certain phrases and certain words, because every person, whether it's President Biden, who I didn't vote for and never will, but or whether it's the VP or anyone else, like, I'm not going to dehumanize them. And I will say, it is wrong for her to go to this abortion clinic, but I'm not going to make fun of the way she looks. I'm not going to like say something really snarky about her or Biden. I'm not going to mock President Biden, because I just feel like when you do that, you lose ground and it closes the door. So I would say, like, one hand is knowing who you are, but the other is being respectful to people and speaking the truth in love. And that combination, I think, makes you like a really strong voice.
Being cordial. Jot that down. I'm going to give that a try.
It's kind of
Some
like a
notes,
lost
Scott.
art, but
Might
a lot of people don't subscribe to it, but it's
try
done.
that out sometime.
It's really helped me in my journey. I've been at abortion clinics and rallies, the Capitol and the White House and the Supreme Court, and I've like gone across to the other side and like tried to shake people's hands. I was in Congress. I was between two abortion doctors, and the congressional leaders were like, the congressman, they were asking one particular one who's a Black woman, Black abortion doctor. They were like, "What do you think about what Miss Bennett had to say?" And she was like, "Oh, Miss Bennett doesn't understand Black women." And I went up to her afterwards and I said, hi, and she looked at me like she couldn't believe that I approached her. And I extended my hand, and I said, "Oh, I want to introduce myself to you. And thank you for your testimony." And she was just like, and I've had that happen over and over again. One of the girls who leads national abortion rights here, we were at an event and I went right up to her and she was like, just like, manifesting, like, I can't believe you're talking to me. And I said, I don't agree with you, obviously, but I know you've had an abortion, so I can understand some of the reasons why you have these strong beliefs. And I have my own reasons too. And I want you to know you're not my enemy. Even in this process, I'm always open to talking to you if you'd ever want to have a conversation. Now, have I had a lot of conversations with, have they, taken my invitation to go to tea? Not really. But I always think to myself, if they ever change, they will be comfortable coming to me because they won't think that I hated them,
You are kind, you are confident, and you know what? You're fun too. I've really enjoyed talking to you. So on Instagram, or as the kids like to say, Insta, Black pro-life woman. That's where we can find you.
Yep. Keep it simple. Yeah.
Christina Bennett, thank you very much for joining us on Dear Jane. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Dear Jane. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got a new episode every week. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget to tell your friends about us either. Our producer is Kate Ewell. Our editor is Jacob McCormick. For Marcy Little, I'm Scott Baker. Thanks for listening to Dear Jane.